So here we go again. So this is my second robot video. And as you can see, my Raspberry Pi is not attached to anything. And if you can see, we've got some other circuits here as well. I've gone back to the drawing board and I want to try and actually put some effort into designing this properly rather than just throwing things together as I previously did. I've got a new hat. So a hat is just a board that sits on top of your Raspberry Pi. This one here has some screen terminals that just make it a lot easier to attach things, right? Small mistake I've made is these are all supposed to be jumper pins, all right? I'll show you an example in a minute of a jumper pin that says whether you want these to be connected to the outputs or not. So I've had to just throw that together just so I can put some power in. And what I'm just testing here is a new power circuit for my car that I'm building. So just to explain, we have batteries here. There's 4 batteries at 1.5 volts that'll give you 6 volts down here. I've connected these two in series, so we've got another battery pack up in the back here, right? Together in series gives us 12 volts all up. What I've recently learnt that I did not know, these are motor driver units, fairly common. You find them on eBay, quite cheap. Oh, this one's missing a screw. All right, at any rate, they've got these terminals here for power. This is your 12 volts, or your supply in. It doesn't have to be 12 volts, to be honest. This is your supply in, this is your ground, and this is your logic reference voltage. And I had always thought that you need to supply this, and so I was supplying it from my regulator here. But what it turns out is on board, as you can see it, this guy here is a 5 volt regulator already, and this jumper here, okay, is determining whether this pin here is an output from your voltage regulator. If you take this off, then you need to supply 5 volts as input. Now that I realize that, this module here only needs 12 volt in, right? Oh, totally lost that now. Only needs 12 volt in, which will go out to your motors according to the input pins here. And it will generate its own 5 volt reference internally, and it just needs a ground as reference. That makes my circuitry much easier. So what I've put together here is I've got one set of batteries, and up the back here, second set of batteries. Through these 2 terminal blocks, so the batteries come in here and here, I've looped them together via this red cable here. All right, so that's the, just joining them together so they're in series. Here's all my positive voltage coming out. Here's all my ground coming out. All right, so the 2 motor driver units. So I'm going to drive 4 motors independently in this car. So this one can drive 2 DC motors by these terminals, or 1 stepper motor, because you need 2 coils for a stepper motor. So this will drive 2 motors. The other unit here will drive the other 2 motors, right? They're getting 12 volts to drive the motors, even though they're only 6 volt motors, but there's plenty of spare power there. And then this guy over here is a variable DC regulator, DC-DC. So it's taking the 12 volts in, and I've adjusted it via this adjustment potentiometer to give a little bit over 5 volts into the Raspberry Pi. And for those of you who don't know, the Raspberry Pi actually runs on 3.3 volts. So some of the pins on here, you can see one there mentioned 3.3 volts. Okay, so you can access the 3.3 volts, but it will generate that on the Raspberry Pi board itself, so you don't need to. You just need to give it 5 volts in. If you don't give it 5 volts in, if this is too low, then the Raspberry Pi can reboot. And I had that issue in my first design. I didn't have the regulator, and so as a result, every time you turn the motors on, your battery voltage drops a bit, and you end up resetting the Raspberry Pi. So this is where I'm at. I've actually bought a whole new kit. So I bought a whole new kit, but I won't worry about that today. So what I'm looking at doing here is, this is just a test of the power circuitry. Make sure I can power the Raspberry Pi properly, and this new hat on top will help me just plug cables in a lot easier. I've already got the Wi-Fi module here, all right, so I can connect to the local network, and I can access it over the network and program on it directly. Various other things to mount up that I will work on. Okay, and I'll keep you posted. So the next step now is to see how I can mount things onto the board. I'll just go quick preview. So I'm just starting to mount things up here and just see how they're going to go. Going for different design, I'm putting the wheels underneath now because I kept running out of room. So the motors are going to sit underneath. The battery packs are going to go in the middle, and then the circuitry is going to sit on top. The Raspberry Pi and the motor drivers, etc., and any other circuitry that I come up with. Cool. All right, thank you. I'll keep you posted on how we go.